How's it going, guys? It's good to see you. I almost skipped going live today, but I'm trying to keep a streak going here. I said I'm trying to go live at least once a week. So today's Friday, so my week is up. Hi, Sweet Potato. Hi, Island Girl. I kept postponing this live and it took me a while to get myself settled, but I was busy doing errands today. So the live was pushed 3 hours later than usual. Anyways, how's everybody doing? I'm going to do small lives here and there. I'm trying to get myself back in the algorithm. I was doing pretty well at the end of last year. I started going live pretty frequently for at least 5 occasions. And then all of a sudden, I just stopped going live again for 3 months. So I'm just going to try to do small lives because if I have to make a live that's over an hour, it has to be organic. I have to be in the mood for it. But most of all, I can't just keep rehearsing what I want to discuss because that's just going to make me lose motivation and I just won't go live. So I have to keep the constant rehearsing to myself because that's what's discouraging me from going live. I don't know what happened, but I think YouTube changed since the last time I went live. There's just a lot of different commands that I don't even understand right now. Uh, do you, Island Girl? I was just looking up to see what's a good sweet spot, right? I don't mind going an hour or 2 hours live, but the energy has to be there. If I don't feel, when you go live and you sense someone is just going live for the sake of keeping themselves in the algorithm, but they sound miserable going live. That's what I'm trying to prevent from happening. I get that a lot of people have their own channels and they just want to keep monetizing their content. But at some point, you can tell when someone's miserable by the sound of their voice, whether or not they're engaging with the topic they are discussing with a good sense of humor or good energy or passion. So I'm just trying to see if I can go live without floundering completely. It's easier said than done. I mean, I've always wanted to do YouTube lives for years, but it just seems like I can never get the ball rolling. Yeah, and you know what, Island Girl, that is smart. I Another option I can do, which I have to get my momentum going, but what I will do is that I'm gonna go live at least once a week. Once a week because it's already tough for me to go live. I just you have to understand that if you have a channel and you're just a small nobody, it's easy for you to just put it aside. Unless you're someone with, a big shot or a big name on this platform, then it's just easy for you to put your channel aside and not care enough to go live frequently. But I might just do what you suggested, Island Girl. In fact, I might just do like one live early in the day and one live later in the day. That could work as well. That's actually not a bad idea. It just depends how I'm feeling, I guess. So I'm just gonna take it one step at a time and see how that goes. What I've been doing lately is that I don't know about you guys, and I never thought I would actually say this out loud, but I have been going to, I won't call it a different community, or maybe it has its own name too. I don't know for certain, but I guess I'll call it the debating community. I've been seeing people debating. I can't believe it because typically I never cared enough about politics in the first place. I feel that politics is just difficult to engage in general, and I've never been a big fan of it because you're arguing with someone and both people are arguing with each other just so the other person can see the other person's point of view. But I have been watching debaters, not I'm not talking about the news. I'm talking about people who go on panels and debate one another for even hours straight. Like some people debate 3 or 4 hours straight. Now, I don't always watch it. I don't always watch the 3 or 4 hours, but I'm actually liking it. I'm surprised I'm liking watching people debate with each other. And let me see, what did you say? Sweet potato with everything going on in this world so much. I like to give my brain a break. Yeah. I'm not enjoying everything that's been happening. I don't know if any of you have been keeping track with the whole Minnesota news, but I'm just so fed up with all of it. To be frank, I don't care who's right or wrong. I'm tired of it. Of all of it. I'm tired of all of it. Um, at some point, it's not about picking sides. It's about nipping everything in the bud. That's what I think. Oh, that sounds interesting, sweet potato. You know what? That's actually pretty clever of you. Well, I've been doing things differently though. I have been having a weird obsession with coloring lately. The past several months, I've been coloring constantly. And sometimes I color to the point where it can be even an hour long and I don't even notice it. So I've been having this really strange obsession with coloring books lately. And I never used to color books. I didn't care to color books or anything of that nature. But now I'm doing it more frequently. So I guess that's become a hobby of mine. I guess it calms my mind a little bit, so that's why I'm probably doing it more often now. What I've been doing successfully is going to the gym. Um, yeah, it is island. Think that's why I'm starting to like it a lot. But you know what I'm doing? I'm actually trying something different. So, and maybe a lot of people might think I'm crazy for doing this. I don't blame you. But I'm actually doing coloring with my non-dominant hand. So it makes the experience a little bit more challenging. So now I'm coloring with my left hand, which is my non-dominant hand. And I'm actually getting pretty good at it, surprisingly. When I first started with my left hand, the first time I picked up a coloring book, I used to scribble all over the page with the marker. But now I'm drawing exactly or as close to the line as possible. So I'm trying something new. I think it's very calming. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes it puts me to sleep. And that's hard for me as a night owl. I'm a person who just doesn't know how to sleep properly. I try different angles, but they never work out. I always want to go to sleep at least by 12 and midnight, at least one. And it never usually works out for a very long time. I always go back and forth. I have a little bit of a streak going, and then I completely bomb. Yeah, and you know what I noticed, sweet potato? When I use my non-dominant hand to color, um, you know what I notice? What I notice is that I become more tired. Like, I don't know if it's that it's just that using your non-dominant hand drains you of your energy, but every time I color with my left hand, I get more once I'm done coloring whatever section I'm coloring, I become tired. I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm already tired from drawing this portion of the page, half of the page, however much I draw or color." But that's, that's one thing. And another thing is I can't believe I'm saying this, but I have a little bit of a milestone going. So in 3 days, today's the 6th, right? I believe today's the 6th of February. So on the 9th of February, I'm going to hit a little bit of a milestone. So I am going to hit 1 year on February 9th of no, you know, no visual addiction. Like my visual addiction, put it away last year on February 9th, and I have not done it since February 9th of last year. So I'm hitting a year in 3 days. I can't even believe it. I almost felt that it was yet almost like yesterday when I decided to quit completely. That addiction really lasted a long time. And I always would try to quit, and I try to always just give up because it was making me miserable, right? I didn't use it because of just the fact that I like watching it. A lot of people may start that way. I did it because it was a bit of a stress reliever, but it constantly took away um, the realization, it sort of numbed the realization that I was lonely. So anytime I would use any visual content for for self pleasure, it distracted me from my loneliness, my isolation, and so on. I'm not proud of the fact that I used it for so many years. I wish I would have given up way sooner. But in 3 days, I'm gonna hit that 1 year mark. And let me tell you, it has been a very tough year to quit that habit completely. It put me into, maybe that's why I've been very bitchy this past year. Maybe that maybe that might be a reason. Maybe that was part of the side effects. You quit visual content and you're just gonna become a straight up bitch. So maybe that was the reason right there. Um, Again, I think it did affect my mood, because it was challenging to put it away. Anytime I felt stress, I just couldn't I couldn't go to the visual site for self-pleasure anymore. I had to basically distract my mind by doing something else. But maybe it was also going to the gym. In fact, I have been working out prior to the gym, but I had never gone to a gym and I never had a membership until last year. So I started working out here and there pretty consistently throughout 2024. But then I decided, okay, once my roommate introduced me to Planet Fitness, I thought I was actually going to give up the gym pretty quickly. I was never much of a gym. I just was never motivated to go to the gym. I wasn't gym centric enough for the gym. But surprisingly, I've gone to the gym since May of last year. So I'm almost hitting a 1 year mark going to the gym as well. But really, what motivated me to going to the gym in the first place was because back in 2024, at some point, I had a scan done to my liver, and supposedly I had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So that's what really motivated me eventually to work out more and then eventually transition into the gym. So I've been going, and let me tell you, I'm going consistently as much as possible. So typically, I go to the gym every single day. I go to the gym 7 days a week unless something prevents me from going to the gym. But I've been going consistently 7 days a week. But going to the gym 7 days a week can it can literally kick your butt. I mean, I do it because I am loving it so far, but there are days where I leave the gym very grumpy, very groggy, very out of sorts. Yeah, and you know what, sweet potato? I think that's going to the gym is what also helped me put the visual content away. Maybe that also added an extra layer of protection from me going back to the visual content. Yeah, I have to get good at that. I really have to get good. Working out is great, but I have to also improve my diet as well. I'm not very good at that. Do you know how long it took me to start like eating salads? I started eating salads like around the end of 2023. Like eating salads for me is just such a pain in the butt. I like it, don't get me wrong. It's not the taste or the flavor, it's just the habit. If you don't have a habit to do something, then you're not gonna like doing it. But I've been eating, I'm trying to eat better. I'm trying to eat more salads. I'm trying to eat more nuts. I'm trying to eat more, what is it? I'm trying to drink more smoothies, whatever, proteins, anything. I'm really trying, but it's so damn difficult. So I just really wanted to hop on and just discuss a few things. I don't know if I'm going to go over each and every single point I have for this live. Um, did you guys realize that I just read a day or two ago news about a guy? He was a worker for Olive Garden and he lived, I believe he lived in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I don't know what happened to this guy, but he entered his shift. And at some point during his shift, he basically lunged, like he took his clothes off and then he lunged his head straight first into a fryer. Can you believe that? I don't understand what's happening. I read it and I couldn't believe it. It left me in complete disbelief. I was just thinking to myself, what would urge you to dump your head inside a fryer, a food fryer? And there was a female coworker, I'm assuming. She also tried to, I'm assuming she tried to pull him, and she might have gotten minor burn injuries herself. But she was trying to pull him, but it was too late. Either there weren't enough people or he was just that determined to go and unalive himself. And this guy was a cook. for Olive Garden. And he did this a week ago. There wasn't much press coverage. I don't believe they reported it from what I read. This was all hush hush because I think there was an investigation, so they didn't want to um, make it public. Yeah, Island Girl, that could be a possibility. But I really think that we've reached a point. I really think we've reached a point where we need to bring three things back. Okay, we need to bring class. We need to be more classy these days. We need to bring class. We need to bring what is it? We really need to bring mental asylums back as well because people are just they're losing their heads. They're running like chickens without their heads. And I just can't understand how someone would traumatize their coworkers and commit S in front of them. I just don't understand how someone is capable of going that far. But that's what he ended up doing. I can't even imagine how I would respond to a situation if I saw a coworker of mine committing S in front of me in that type of way. I just don't. I think I would need time off. Forget the PTO. Just give me time off. Hey Navajo, how are you? Hope your day's well. Oh my God, are you serious? Sweet potato? Oh Lord. That had to be an icy experience. So that's the story with the Williamsport, Pennsylvania Olive Garden cook who basically unalived himself by plunging his head inside a food fryer. I just I don't know what's going on, but oh, I remember now. We need to these are the 3 things, guys, that we really need to bring back. We need to bring back. We need to bring back class, mental asylum, and shame. That's what we really need to bring back, all of the above. Because people are just losing their marbles on a whim. They really are. And I'm gonna tell you why people are losing their marbles when I share this next story that just left me completely baffled. So, and I appreciate it, Navajo. Thank you for listening. Be careful on your way back to your house. Let me tell you what really shocked me. So, did you guys hear the story, this Las Vegas story that recently happened? Um, there was a story about this 28-year-old named Quentin Baker. And this 20-year-old, basically what he did was, I'm gonna assume either he must have went to his apartment or his baby mama's apartment. They didn't really share the nature of the relationships. I'm gonna assume they're together and they're a couple. But essentially what happened is he invaded the home around 119. Now the problem is I can't say if he invaded the home or not, but let's just say he went to his home and he had one too many nuts or screws loose. And he essentially, what he did was assault his wife's friend, and he also assaulted his wife. And then what ended up happening is he took his 3-year-old son, Kenton Baker. And what happened after is that essentially he lost his mind. He took his son as a hostage. I don't know exactly what was his end goal by taking his son as a hostage, but that's exactly what he did. And eventually the friend, she tried to call the police. I guess they couldn't respond. Something happened. The call got dropped. Then the wife or whatever she is to him called and she said, "Hey, this guy, my husband or boyfriend, whatever they are, he is gonna basically unalive my son and himself." And so this guy eventually confronted the police, and there was a police standoff. So once the police arrived, she told the police that he went back to the apartment, and then eventually something happened where the situation escalated, and he got out with his son, and he basically said to her, to the wife, before police came, they better not come here and they better not do anything, or else you won't have me or your son. So meaning you're gonna end up with neither one of us. So I'm gonna assume that that mother was traumatized from the experience because she was put between a rock and a hard place. And then what happened is after, right? What happened after is he went outside and he escalated the situation and he told police that, look, I have my son. I am going to basically K myself. So he put the police in a very stressful position because I believe he had that gun lock and loaded and he was pointing it at his son. And something happened where eventually police tried to shoot him down, but eventually he his gun discharged and he also ended up shooting his son as well. So that was just um that was just sad for me to read that story. It just goes to show you that there are situations where kids are going through an abusive situation and they are just living with either one or both sets of parents just completely dysfunctional. They just can't assume the role of a parent in a responsible manner. And I'm not going to say that you have to be perfect as a parent. No parent is perfect. Even if you think they are, each and every single person has a flaw here and there. But it's your responsibility to also recognize what you can and can't handle. If you can't handle being a parent, then you've got two choices. Either walk away and let the other person assume full responsibility for that child, or in the case that both parents are in the same boat, then give that child away so they don't have to put up with that abusive nonsense. So that's what happened. This 28-year-old Quentin Baker ended up assassinating his 3-year-old son. What drove him to that point? He basically went outside as police, I'm going to assume, surrounded the apartment complex. And he said, look, I'm about to cane myself. Well, why did you have to drag your son into it? If you felt you were at that breaking point, why drag your son, a 3-year-old baby who had his whole life ahead of him, and the person who deleted him from this world was his own father? It just, I don't know, it just really screws my brain. Even trying to process how someone would go off the deep end and eliminate their own seed. I mean, you should be embarrassed to have even lived in this world for 28 years. You really should be embarrassed. If even at my darkest hour and I felt the need to do the unthinkable, I would not drag someone into it, okay? If I was at that point, I would not drag a family member or anyone for that matter, because that is my burden to carry, and I shouldn't make other people be included. So it just left a sour taste in my mouth to see that happening. So, rest in peace and prayers to, I believe his name was Kenton Baker, 3 years old, lost his life. And most of all, the wife, the mom, prayers to her. There's also a lot of stories, right, circulating about how the police shot both of them. There's also a story that the mom wife is blaming police. Again, I don't know exactly if that is necessarily true. Hopefully, the body cam footage can show exactly what went on, if there are any missing details. Um, Hopefully, this whole situation can be put to rest because, again, a 3-year-old lost their life because of their father just not taking responsibility and getting the necessary help. Because if you're at that breaking point, newsflash, you should not be a parent. You should not be a parent at that point. You should be in a mental institution with a straitjacket on. That's what you should be doing. Instead of dragging your child and putting their life at risk because you can't emotionally and mentally control yourself. So that's the Las Vegas story that I wanted to share with you guys. Now, for the final story that I wanted to share, this guy, um, I discussed him in my previous video. His name is Jake Lang. If you're not familiar with Jake Lang, apparently he is this right wing extremist, whatever you want to call him, influencer, right wing extremist influencer. He was one of these people who got arrested during, if you remember, the J6 Capitol invasion riot that took place years ago. He was one of these individuals who got arrested and he was served 4 years in prison, or he has 4 years, right? Because eventually President Trump pardoned all the J6 rioters. So this guy has been making a lot of headlines lately. One of which is that last month he got himself in trouble because there was an angry mob of people who cornered him because he was basically saying that, I think he apparently said that Somalis are the N word, and he apparently tried to hold an anti Islam rally, and he eventually wanted to burn the Quran, which made all of these people who were already in the streets corner him. And eventually he ended up wounded from the experience because he was surrounded by so many people throwing water at him, harassing him, picking on him. And I guess someone must have gotten a clean shot with a weapon, and he ended up basically, with the help of some people, he left the area. But these people eventually followed him to a hotel. And I'm surprised that the police didn't make any arrests for any of these people who followed him to the hotel. And then eventually someone escorted him out with their vehicle. But now something happened where yesterday there was an ice sculpture that was made in Minnesota, and it was placed, I believe, in front of the Capitol building. And basically, this ice sculpture read, Prosecute ICE. And I believe the sum of that sculpture was $6,000. Apparently, a group had a permit to put the sculpture there. And this same individual, Jake Lang, who is the right-wing extremist influencer who got arrested in January 6th, he went there and he basically kicked the ice sculpture. And instead of the ice sculpture saying prosecute ICE, it said pro ICE. Just basically saying, we're not going to encourage this anti ICE rhetoric. So he basically kicked the sculpture until it said pro ICE. Well, he ended up arrested and he got a felony for the destruction of that property. And he's been sentenced and booked. I don't know exactly how long he'll be in prison. Usually they say if you commit a felony in some cases, depending on the value of the property you damage, it could be up to 5 years on top of $1,000 fine or higher. But that happened. And the problem I have is I do believe he deserved to be punished for essentially destroying property. But my issue is this this ice sculpture, right, that says prosecute ICE. I'm the type of person which I've said before, the news about Minnesota has been leaving me emotionally numb because I'm just seeing a lot of disregard towards ICE simply because of people who ended up losing their lives, which was tragic. It shouldn't have happened, but it ended up happening anyways. So the people who lost their lives, such as Alex Preddy and Renee Good, it's almost as if people just want to ignore their actions that day. These were people who were rioters, and yet people are just ignoring the fact as if they never did anything wrong. They didn't intervene in what is it? They didn't intervene in ICE operations. These people were rioting. These people were not complying with ICE when they told them, hey, get out of the vehicle. They would not get out of the vehicle, even though they were obstructing, walking on the roads, parking their cars to block access. Anything that they did, it was just basically completely ignored altogether. And I'm just going to say that this you can disagree with the fact that they lost their lives, and that's fine. But when is it that we hold people accountable for their actions as well? I would not walk into an ICE event and obstruct ICE. That's just common sense. But it just seems that common sense just doesn't apply equally. It just seems that some people can get away with their actions and you're just supposed to turn a blind eye. And again, when Alex Preddy got shot, I said, yeah, ICE deserves the Border Patrol deserves some consequences because of the way they shot the guy. They deserve consequences, whether that means an extended leave, reduced pay, etc. I try to look at this situation in the middle as much as possible, but a lot of other people, they're not trying to look at this situation reasonably. They're just trying to basically say, well, ICE are the evildoers, prosecute ICE, F ICE, etc. And I'm just thinking, these people are doing their jobs just as all of us are doing our jobs. Imagine if we got cornered like ICE just because we're doing our jobs. It just doesn't make any sense how people go this far. But, and I get it. Sometimes passion gets in the way and we end up making ourselves look foolish. It can happen to the best of us. But it's just like there's not a lot of reasonable people here. They just want to see what they want to see and they want to convince you it's the truth. And that's where it peeves my mind trying to look at this situation, but I'm not seeing any room for rationality or compromise. At some point, you just have to look at the situation for what it is and realize, yeah, was it tragic that they lost their lives? Absolutely. It shouldn't have happened, but they shouldn't have put themselves in that position to begin with. And even when they show footage of Alex Preddy going to a different rally where he also confronted ICE, kicked their vehicle, apparently spit on an ICE agent, and still after that evidence was shown, people are still saying, you know what, Alex Preddy's still a hero, F ICE. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this is why we're all having a human problem here because we're willing to we can't see right from wrong anymore. We just label who we think is wrong and we stick to that label. And anyone else we convince ourselves is right, we're biased enough to just let it go unnoticed. And that's the problem. That's essentially the problem we're running into. Um, And then we have a situation where after that ice sculpture that said prosecute ICE was kicked by Jake Lang, which I believe he does deserve to face charges because this guy is, I was trying to, you know, be reasonable and I was trying to be impartial towards him, but it just seems that this guy just likes to look for trouble as well. So at this point, if they arrest him and he has to stay in jail, I guess he basically deserved it at this point because he's just looking for more trouble. But what shocks me as well is he's going to jail for kicking an ice sculpture. But why aren't the people who raided that hotel in prison? Why don't they have a set of handcuffs? Why don't they have a mugshot? So you see, the law isn't applying equally here. And the problem I have with Minnesota is that when they protest, it quickly turns into rioting. Key example, when these people who were initially protesting against this guy chased him into a hotel. And they all went inside the hotel. They weren't outside of the hotel. They raided the hotel. And I don't see the cops charging any of these people for vandalism or anything. That's the part that leaves me speechless. You go to jail for knocking an ice sculpture, but you don't go to jail for invading a hotel? I mean, the laws are not making any sense. The common sense isn't making any sense. None of this is making any sense. But again, that's just what seems to be happening. And the worst part is some of these people, these protesters, or even these advocacy groups, why aren't you calling out the governor? Because all of this started because of Nick Shirley exposing the fraud that's taking place in Minnesota. This is what really got the dominoes all scattering everywhere. And from there, we have all of these rallies, all of these protests, and so on. And it's not just going on in Minnesota, it's happening now everywhere. It's happening in, goodness gracious, I believe it was like what, Chicago. It's been happening in Oregon. It's been happening in California. It's been happening in Washington. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is just not good. And the worst part is no one's holding the Minnesotan government responsible for this situation because the guy Tim Walz and everyone else from that Ilhan Omarchik and the what is his name? Oh my God, Jacob Fry. They have all been going along with this anti-ICE rhetoric instead of telling their constituents, hey, cool your jets, let ICE do their daily operations and go back to your homes. Go back to your homes, but do not interfere with any of the ICE agents doing their jobs. Please keep that in mind. But no one's doing it. No one from the Minnesotan government has done it. They're all saying F ICE, and they're also telling their constituents more or less to stand up against ICE. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're not only standing up to them, but they're harassing them. And then they want to cry foul once they get pepper sprayed or whatever ICE does to them. So at some point, we have to draw a line in the sand because it can't be you knock an ice sculpture, you go to jail, but then you invade a hotel and you're cuffs free. That doesn't make any sense. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But then we have this situation where this man, Jacob oh my God, Thomas. I say Thomas. Uh, the person who is basically the common defense communicator. He's basically said served in the military, and this is one of the key people responsible for this prosecute ice sculpture. And it surprised me that it came from a veteran of all people. Basically, it's funny to me that he calls Jake Land an insurrectionist, but then you have a prosecute ice sculpture. It's just you're a veteran, but you're going to put a prosecute ice sculpture. Like, I just don't know where the common sense is anymore. I really don't. Well, I mean, hush. This is what I'm seeing, and uh, I don't think you should be coming here claiming anything when you don't know anything about my politics. I've never been fond of MAGA, and I don't care much about MAGA, but I care about calling the BS, and that's essentially what I'm doing. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to like it. No one's asking you to. That's just what I'm basically covering. Again, if that's a problem for you, you can just leave. I'm not saying ICE has never been brutal. I said that the way ICE murdered Alex Preddy was out of control. I didn't agree with it, but I'm also not going to say Alex Preddy was a martyr. If you think I'm going to say that, then I'm sorry. That's delusional. If you think I'm going to say Renee Good was innocent or a martyr, then you're delusional. I'm not going to say that. But I also said that if ICE carries their responsibilities the way they did with Alex Freddie, that they should face consequences for their actions. If it means they have to lose their job as a result of what they did to Alex Preddy, then so be it. But I'm not going to turn Alex Preddy into someone who was just walking a sidewalk and randomly got shot because that's not what happened. If you saw the footages of Alex Preddy, You know Alex Preddy obstructed ICE as well. He didn't mind kicking cars, didn't mind spitting on people, didn't mind getting in people's faces. And the first video that they showed of Alex Preddy, they showed him on a sidewalk. But when you see more videos later on, you see that he was in the middle of the road and he also was kicking taillight and everything else in between. So he's not the smarter that people are trying to paint him as. He's just not. But I can understand why it affects people, and I can understand why people would turn against ICE because they're not handling the situation correctly either by shooting the man the way they did. That much I can say. But I'm not going to say Alex Preddy or Renee Good were innocent either. Renee Good, for instance, she was told to get out of her vehicle. And even when they told her to get out of her vehicle, she refused. She turned on her car and she just pressed the pedal to the metal and ignored orders. And eventually, I guess she had tunnel vision because she didn't see the ICE agent in front of her that she almost ran over. So that's just how I look at the situation. I look at it logically. I don't look at it like, well, F ICE, everything ICE does is automatically wrong. That's not how I look at things. Both ICE, Renee Good, and Alex Preddy were all three of them were wrong. How about that? That's how I look at it. But that does not make me MAGA. Anyways, so Jacob Thomas, right? The common defense communicator for this advocacy group. He basically said that he served this country and that Jake Lang, who is an insurrectionist, basically that he won't let that deter him. And that essentially what Jake Lang did was attack his First Amendment. And I'm just thinking to myself, it was wrong that he destroyed the ice sculpture. But why are you a veteran saying prosecute ICE? Because to me, I would think you would be above this type of rhetoric. To me, anyone who believes that Alex Preddy and Renee Good were completely innocent in this situation are just completely brainwashed. You can say some of the things that ICE did was completely wrong, and I'll agree to an extent. But to say Alex Preddy and Renee Good were innocent, yeah, I'm not going to buy into that narrative. And you know who's also responsible for Alex Preddy and Renee Good's murder, if we even want to go that far? Is the Minnesota government to an extent, in my opinion, allegedly. Why? Because they were stoking the flames in the backgrounds. Instead of telling their resident, get your ass back home, they kept making the situation worse by adding more anti-ICE rhetoric. Go after ICE. And there was also a signal chat proven eventually where there was these people in a chat communicating with each other. I don't know if it's an app, what the signal chat is. If it's an app, it could be an app where they communicate with each other to track where ICE is. So that's essentially paid rioters, obstructionists right there. But that's supposed to be okay? I'm sorry, at some point, I, I'm not saying you have to like ICE. I'm calling the bullshit where it needs to be called out. That's the difference. But you know, one thing that caught me off guard was with this Marine veteran, Peter McKenzie. He said that peaceful protest is not ex- what is it? Extremism. I'm sorry, none of that protesting was peaceful. They would get in people's faces, they would scream to the top of their lungs, they would blow whistles, and so on. That to me isn't peaceful protesting. It just isn't. But I mean, this is coming from a Marine veteran. I don't know how he jumped to the conclusion that this is peaceful protesting. People are confusing protesting with rioting. That's just the truth. It seems that they don't know the difference, or they're confusing, or they're conflating the two. I just don't, some protesting is peaceful, but when you start blocking roads, or when you start to get in people's faces, screaming, chanting, and blowing whistles, at some point, that's not peaceful protesting. It just isn't. Yeah, well, Hush, I do think that there is an organization that's behind these protests going on. And even if you want to say that's not true, which is fine, the government of Minnesota hasn't made the situation any easier. Instead of saying to their residents, hey, leave ICE alone or you will face the consequences, they didn't do anything. They just let the protests happen. And even if you don't want to use ICE as an example, you can use Jake Lang as an example when he was raided by all these protesters, and eventually, even when he went to a hotel, they invaded the hotel as well. That's not protesting. At some point, you can't call something protesting when it's not protesting. That's just how I look at it. And basically, what this common defense organization wants to do is they want Congress to withhold federal funding to the Department of Homeland Security. That's one. And two, they want Congress to enact legislation that allows citizens to sue federal rights if the civil rights are violated by federal agents. I don't think any of this is going to happen. I don't think any of this is going to really happen. When you boil it down to it, the Alex Preddy situation was intense, the way they handled it. But outside of that one situation, which I said, I believe the Border Patrol agent or the ICE agent, either or, whoever fired that many rounds, they should be put on leave or fired, whichever one comes first. But to basically expect this organization, the Common Defense Organization, which is a veteran advocacy organization, they want Congress to withhold federal funding. And they also want to allow citizens to sue federal agents if their civil rights are abused somehow. None of that is going to work. I'm going to tell you why. Because none of those people, especially the protesters who were there, they didn't care. They didn't care if they obstructed ICE. They didn't care if they were rioting. So essentially, they're pushing for this idea. This group is pushing Congress, essentially, to take legislative measures to reduce funding until there's a complete reform of ICE. And they also want Congress to grant citizens the right to sue. Well, I mean, if all of them are upset over ICE, that means each and every single one of them can sue ICE. Each and every single one of them can claim abuse and sue ICE. That doesn't work because if you look at the situation in terms of how it escalated in Minnesota, the government didn't step in and say, hey, retreat, stop the protesting from going this far. They didn't say anything. They just said, you know what, screw ICE, go after ICE, have a field day. And that's exactly what most of these protesters did. And I'm talking about the ones whom specifically obstructed the roads or got in front of the ICE agents. I'm not talking about the ones who were on the sidewalk holding their signs up. I'm talking about the ones who got in the ICE agents' faces. There's a distinction here I want to make because I'm not going to say you shouldn't protest against ICE if you're against ICE. I'm saying if you're going to get in their face and you're going to blow whistles and you're going to start kicking, screaming, swearing, spitting, then you don't deserve any special privileges. And what this organization's doing, the Common Defense Veteran Advocacy Organization, what they're doing is they're basically telling Congress, you know what, Congress, you need to withhold federal funding. Congress, if they violate civil rights, then every person deserves to sue. That just doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't. Now, in the case of Alex Preddy, if they end up shooting someone the way they shot Alex Preddy, would I say that they deserve to get fired? And even if they prove something more and above than what we see, should they get a jail sentence of some kind? Sure. Should they get fired? Sure. Whatever punishment, it's fine. They deserve to be punished if they go that far. I agree with that to that extent. I didn't like the way Alex Preddy was shot. The first time I saw it, I was shivering. Like I became an anxious wreck when I saw the way Alex Preddy was shot. But once I saw more evidence come out, I said, okay, so this isn't this guy's first rodeo. This is something this guy has continuously done. And the last time he confronted ICE, not only did he kick the backlight of the ICE agent's vehicle, he also decided to get close enough to spit and spit one of the ICE agents as well. So this guy really, when you think about it, he wasn't this innocent bystander people are trying to portray him. And neither was Renee Good. And in fact, a lot of the time people forget that Renee Good's wife was there. And she didn't make the situation any better because she told her wife, who was behind that wheel, to drive and basically ignore ICE agents and avoid complying with them. And then what happened there? Renee Good lost her life unnecessarily. And people still want to claim victimhood here. There is no victimhood. It was tragic, but a lot of people just want to point the finger at ICE, but they don't want to point the finger at the other person who was obstructing in the first place. You know, that's essentially all I wanted to share. It doesn't look good either way. Obviously, no one should lose their lives, but to call every situation a protest gone wrong is just a straight up lie, as far as I'm concerned. Um, I think you have every right to protest ICE, but once you start getting in people's faces and once you start damaging their property or putting them in a position where they have to question their safety, then anything that happens after that, at some point, the responsibility falls on you. It's easy to make ICE the villain, when people are pushing this rhetoric or narrative about them, and you simply go along with it. But when you look at the situation for what it is, you're going to see that not all of these protesters are actually protesters. These are people who are either paid actors who are protesting, or these are people who just don't know anything about boundaries. It's either one of these two groups. Now, this isn't to say that you can't hold a sign up your head that says screw ICE. It doesn't matter to me. You can say that about ICE. You can hold up a sign for all I care. But once you start getting in people's faces and you start thinking that the law doesn't apply to you, that's when you're going to get yourself in trouble. And then people still have the audacity to say, oh, cut funding for ICE. Oh, allow people to sue ICE. When most of these videos, I've seen them on YouTube. I've seen them live. And all I see is ICE arresting people. That's all I'm seeing. And then all these protesters start circling ICE. Some of them get in their faces. And then you want to say, oh, you have the right to sue ICE. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But on top of it, it has gone so intense that at some point, the mayor, the governor, anyone should have said, hey, enough is enough. This is escalating to a point of no return, and we shouldn't go there. But they didn't do anything. Case in point, when Jake Lang was followed inside a hotel. Now, I don't like what Jake Lang did. And honestly, what he did with the ice sculpture, he does deserve a penalty. But I look at it the other side as well. And I'm thinking, yeah, you can't go inside a hotel either. And none of those people got arrested. None of those people got fined, nothing. And these are the same people that we want to believe are somehow protesters. It's just, I look at the situation for what it is. And I can extend sympathy and say it's tragic that they lost their lives. But I'm not going to say, oh my God, they lost their lives because I just had a bone to pick with them. I'm not going to say that about them. They're adults. They had a choice. They made it, and it ultimately cost their lives. That's just how it is. If you put yourself in front of a vehicle that's running, let's just say you're suicidal, right? And you jump in front of a vehicle. Whose fault is that? The vehicle or you? It's you because you put yourself in front of a vehicle. It's just that simple. Now, in the case of Renee Good, they were telling her, hey, like, get out of the vehicle. And she thought, I'm above the law. I don't have to get out of the vehicle. And then she just hit reverse, and then she slammed the freaking pedal and was ready to run that ICE agent over. And then unfortunately she got shot. And it wasn't helpful with the wife saying in the background, hey, drive, drive. That didn't help the situation either. It only escalated it. But that's essentially the tragedy that has befallen Minnesota. Hopefully that situation improves. Last time I checked, apparently most of the ICE agents have left Minnesota. So maybe these protests have gone down since, but I haven't fully checked it fully, so I'm not 100% certain. But that's all I really have to share. I'm surprised I kind of went a little bit over than usual, but hey, that's good. In terms of helping me in the algorithm, I'd rather do 20 to 40-minute videos, but hey, I guess I pushed it to an hour today. Anyways, I'm gonna um, exit left, and I'm gonna just leave you guys to do your things. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to click like, go ahead. I'm trying to get back into the groove of doing things and going live more frequently, at least once a week. But again, these are my opinions, and no one has to fully agree with them. I'm not perfect. I make my own mistakes as well, but I'm not delusional. And the bottom line is, you can say that Renee Good and Alex Preddy didn't deserve to lose their lives, how they shouldn't have lost their lives. And I agree with you. They shouldn't have lost their lives. They didn't deserve to lose their lives. But I'm not going to sit here and say that they didn't also play a role in that situation. That's just my bottom line. I look at the situation as a whole. I don't look at it from one side or the other. I look at it as a whole. And what I saw is just people who think that they can do as they please and the consequences don't apply to them. That's just essentially what happened. But people are just going to tell you ICE is bad, so screw them. They lost their lives unfairly. I mean, again, if that's what you want to believe, that's fine. I think you can protest, but you can't say all protesting is peaceful protesting. You can't say peaceful protesting is not extremism based on what this group said, this advocacy, veteran advocacy group that paid for that prosecute ice sculpture. You can't say that all protest is an extremism because we've seen how these Minnesota protests can go far left and out of bounds given the opportunity. And we saw that happen several times. So you can protest, but eventually you have to call a spade a spade. And if it's rioting, then it's no longer protesting. And that's what happened. Now again, it's unfortunate because sometimes when you give an opinion, people think, "Oh my God, you just don't want to admit that what they did to Alex Pretty and Renee Good was bad." No, it was bad. It was bad. But what I'm not gonna do here is say that Alex Pretty and Renee Good didn't have some sort of responsibility for what happened. That's just not what I'm gonna do. Like there are laws that you have to follow, and you have to understand that when you have a situation that can escalate to this extent, and you have a government that's making ICE this villain, and you have these protesters already convinced, hey, we got to stop these people, we got to intervene. These ICE agents aren't always going to think rationally or logically. At some point, the casualty that took place with Alex Preddy is going to keep happening, especially if people don't say or draw a line in the sand or say enough is enough. It's just going to keep happening because now the ICE agents have to worry about who's going to get in their face, who's going to confront them, who's going to do anything to them at this point. I remember the guy who ended up, the ICE agent who ended up murdering Renee Good. His whole life was doxxed just for just for that, just because he was put in a situation where he was in fear of his life and he was dealing with someone who was disgruntled, who wouldn't comply to commands or instructions. And the minute he did the unthinkable, his life ended up exposed. But people want to make it sound like he just walked up to her car and just shot her. That's not what happened. They told her to leave the vehicle. She didn't care. Her wife said, go drive, go leave. She did that. Then she just ignored everyone around her. And then she pressed the pedal, kept driving, and then the ICE agent just shot her because he was in front of the vehicle. So if he didn't shoot her, then she would have ran him over most likely. It is tragic what happened though, but that is it for today. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Please click like, um, and I'll make sure to do a video or a live stream for next week. Until then, thank you guys for watching. You guys have a wonderful day. Bye.